Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Rosemary Hyde, and we are talking about Who Are You? The Impact of Identity is the name of the book. It is Friday, January 14th, 2022. And you will see in the class that I've chosen two pieces, two little pages, paragraphs from the book to inform our discussion. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is the first one. It's page 36. Somebody want to read aloud? Take a paragraph
Yes.
and then let someone else start. Go ahead. So who's going to start? Abu?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I think
Like the tree, humans remain fragile without nurturing, anchoring roots. When we are not connected to our root, we are essentially rootless, floating, desperately grasping onto one affiliation or another, without working from a true understanding of and connection to what makes us who we are. We end up feeling threatened by views of lifestyles that are different and condemning others. Being rooted is a prerequisite for being resilient and open-minded.
Okay. So the first thing is,
Prerequisite.
do we understand all the words? If not, tell me which ones you don't.
Yes, I think prerequisite. Yes, prerequisite.
Prerequisite. Okay. A prerequisite is a requirement to, so being rooted is a prerequisite for being open-minded. If you don't have good roots, you don't meet that requirement. You do not have the prerequisite. It's a word that's often used in academic situations. To take this class, there are prerequisite classes like A and B that you need to have taken before you can start taking this class. Okay? Prerequisite. Okay, what other words? Any? Okay, let's go on. Who'd like to read the second paragraph?
I'll try.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to get close to it.
Yeah.
Each of us was born somewhere and to someone. Your history is a rich collection of parents, ancestors, countries, languages, cultures, all part of who you are. Whether you know about it or not, it's yours. If you connect to your roots, it will make you stronger, like the tree.
Right. And, you know, if we look back, there are now, with the internet, there are now programs that allow us to research our roots. And one of the, it's really interesting because if we look at present day or at what we look like and who our parents, maybe grandparents were, sometimes they all come from the same origins. But an awful lot of people, that's not true. I mean, you know, in the last 100 years, my family roots, there are at least 4 different groups, 4 different countries, 4 different parts of the world. And they're not all white, they're not all European. If you look back millennia, if you look back a couple of thousand years, most of us belong to people from different areas. go back far enough, all of us came from Africa. Even though that's not in our current awareness. But like, I was surprised when I did one of the genetic research things, you know, I sent some spit and they told me what backgrounds my genetic code comes from. And it turns out I'm like, I have a higher level of Cro-Magnon than almost anybody. Like, okay, I have no idea. I have no prejudices or previous knowledge about Cro-Magnon humans who were pre-humans, who were not quite human. But I apparently have more than 10% of my genetic code comes from pre-humans. Yeah, go figure.
I wonder how they go back that far.
Well,
How
they
do
know,
that.
they know what those genes look like and they saw them. So,
Yeah.
you know, so I don't know how many, I mean, if we can just go back, you know, 3 generations, and I have several European ancestors in different places, French, English, Scottish, Irish, Cro-Magnon, and Native American. So, you know, that says something about, you know, where my ancestors were at different times. But if we just go back 1 generation, you know, I was like 50% English and 50% Irish. So I had to pick, what am I going to call myself? Because where I grew up, you were either Irish, Italian, or French. And you had to decide, because you went to different schools, you walked down different parts of the street, you know, and we all need a sense of belonging. And that's just my little history. And I know that my mother grew up in a house where her grandfather, who was Native American and French Canadian, had all his friends come over and play cards in French. And she spoke French. She didn't say that she spoke French, but she knew French. She understood it and she could say it perfectly. And I never understood why until I was in my 50s. And she was visiting me in Missouri in the community where I was studying the French language. And she said, oh, this reminds me of when I was a kid. And my grandfather and his friends were all playing cards and speaking French. I had no idea until then. I mean, I knew that he spoke French, but I didn't realize that she had spent time with him. And therefore, that was how come she always had perfect French pronunciation. You know, I was like, oh. So often our families have secrets or things they found it wiser not to tell us for some reason. When I was working in St. Louis, I was teaching at a university there, and I was doing service learning. So my students, who were writing students, I brought them into downtown St. Louis for class, and we worked at a nursing home in downtown St. Louis, which was an African-American nursing home. Most of the people were from Tennessee and Mississippi and had come to north to St. Louis in around 1940 to get factory jobs or jobs with the railroad or something better than picking cotton. And those people became friends with my white students who thought of themselves as very white. And by the end of the semester, in class discussions because they had made friends with the African Americans in the nursing home. I found out they started talking about their African American relatives. It's like, oh my God, just about everybody had one or several people of color in their close families that they never talked about before that experience. You know, and they said that they were white and they were prejudiced against people of color. But they all had family members who were heads of African descent. And they were people that they were friendly with. So they were adopting one identity in the white European-based environment that wasn't their true identity. We all do that about something. But it was very interesting to watch that disappear. So I don't know, anybody else, you know, do you have more than one ethnic group or cultural group in your background? Or do you have people in your family who have married and had kids with people from different groups? Okay, Blanche, you're nodding your head. You want to talk about it?
My grandfather on my mother's side is Irish.
Okay.
My mother's half Irish. Our family is actually, that's what we're doing, that DNA finding more of who we are. My second generation nieces and nephews are marrying and having children and fiancés who are white. Quite a few of my second generation.
Right.
Yeah, and
That's true in my family too. I
Yeah.
went to a big extended family reunion. And this is, you know, second generation down. And it was people of all colors.
yeah, we're like a rainbow tribe, and
Yeah.
I also found out I have Neanderthal when you were talking about, because they actually can go back. I mean, studying DNA, and I always say it came from my mother's side, of Irish, probably father's side. And it's connected with the condition that I have.
Oh, interesting.
And that takes me to where it was a cave. Now this is the medical history DNA of my condition. And way back during war times, there were people that they found the men weren't strong enough to pull the bows back and run and perform and during wartime. And when they traced back, it was from the Netherlands. And going all the way back, they found DNA in caves, because explorers, when they're digging in agriculture, they take samples.
Mhm.
And in the cave, they said somehow Neanderthals were with, I forget the name of who we are now, Homo sapiens.
Right.
Well, with the Neanderthals, because of the weaknesses in their body, of course, I guess they couldn't run and stuff, so they got killed off. But with them cohabitating in the Netherlands with them, that strain causing that weakness. And then they found coming from that region, going all the way back with the medical ancestry of where this condition came from,
Interesting.
with what they call very weak connective tissue, be it in the bones or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I know I have that also somewhere down in the DNA, and it even for some people with uncontrollable, when it's real hard to control, blood pressure.
Mhm.
And that's like with my daughter's heart condition. And I said, well, you need to be somewhere in a higher elevation because of your ancestral DNA. So I guess her doctors have told her that too, because when I told her, she said, Mom, I'm already aware of that. It's like
Yeah.
she's not in a good place. She needs to be living in a higher
Oh, interesting.
elevation.
Yeah.
So you're gonna find a lot too. You know, we have our cultural DNA, and then we have a lot ancestry, and we also, when you have conditions, you can find out your medical.
Right. Right. So it's really, that is a part of who we are,
Who we
where-
are,
who our deep ancestry were.
right?
And I think that for most people, if you look back, eons, millennia, we all come from a variety of people,
Right.
and we're all mixed up. And, it's interesting because I have a couple of friends here in North Carolina who are, they say, multiracial. Okay, they come from fairly recently from different races, and it's in their appearance. But they have perceived that as unique and unusual, which isn't true. People have joined together with other people and intermarried and traveled to better places and settled in different places and met new people down through the ages.
Eons. I tell you, we're all mutts.
We
We
are.
just don't want to admit it. If everybody looks, there's not one person who's just whatever. We're all mutts because we have been living and coming across all the way before biblical times. I mean, we didn't
right.
just start
Way
3
before.
or 4 generations behind. And
Right.
when I look at that, we identify with the closest 1, 2, 3 generations down. But we're all mutts.
Yeah, the word mutt, for those of you who did not grow up speaking English, another word for it is mongrel. And it's usually applied to dogs, and it means mixed race, because different dog breeds are, races, canine races. And a dog that's allegedly purebred, is registered as belonging to a certain dog race, a certain breed. But the fact is true with dogs too. The purebred dogs, how did they come about? People bred them, and they bred a little of this and a little of that, and they used the different dog races to get appearances and talents. So, yeah.
And for value. And it much more so than that, to be valued. No difference in now, depending on where you were or where you're from and who, whatever, you have more value. But when it comes down to it, just like with purebred dogs, they still came from, like you said, trying to get a good working dog or a good fluffy lap dog or whatever.
Right.
But we're all just mutts. Nobody's
Yeah.
better than anybody else.
But we need to be aware of that,
Mhm.
because otherwise we have funny ways of making up values. that don't correspond to reality. So those of you that are not in the US, do you know what your genetic racial heritage is at all? Is it from one people or from several tribes or different countries or anybody? Somebody, I think I just saw a hand up. Zabula, go ahead.
Indeed, I do not know mine, but I have seen videos on social media of people from my ethnicity and my actually the tribe which I belong to. They have done the DNA test, so I've seen some results of them that they are 46% South Asian where we now live, and they are like 10 and 8 to 10% Scottish and Irish, and it's like unbelievable. How come people from Afghanistan are a mix of Irish and Scottish? Yeah, and it's like
Awesome.
yeah, because Afghanistan was invaded by Alexander the Great, so that could be. And there is another fun fact I was reading about, that people do tourism on the places which Alexander the Great had invaded. They come and they actually they, how do I pronounce it to be politically correct? They sleep with men there to have a breed of Alexander the Great. So I don't know how do I say it in a proper way.
That there's you just say what it is. It's not proper or improper. This is the history of humanity. Everybody sleeps with everybody.
There is a word for it. It's called tourism, but after tourism, before tourism, there is a word for it. I don't know how they say it.
I think tourism doesn't really cover that. It's
like
interbreeding, but I don't know what other word. Anybody else have a story? That's awesome. I didn't know that. So that's one way of looking at our identity is, okay, so what branches of humanity, are in me genetically? And I can pretty much guarantee you that it's a lot more varied than you probably think. And that, it's okay. It's interesting to realize that about ourselves, that, oh, I belong to humanity. That I'm, whatever my closest relatives are, that's what they are. But if you go back hundreds of years, people move and other people move in and people move out. And humanity is about being an animal, is about moving. Trees, they stay in the same place. They also have long histories. But the for trees, movement is all about seeds and spores. Once they take root, they're there. So they develop the knowledge of being in one place and making that place what it is. But people and other animals are all over the place, because that is the nature of animals. So it's something that if you haven't studied, it's worth looking into. It's good to know where we came from. It's good to know, what values go along with that, because in fact, the values of all humanity are the same. But when we know those values and we are okay with our background, there's also, since our backgrounds are so varied, most of us have gone through a period of really relating to, identifying with a part of the background and not so much with other parts. So,
I was thinking about that yesterday because being an African American in this country and then being Black in this country and identified for so many years as being African American. But then as more Africans come here and through social media and learning, because that's, like further chapters, how the social media is changing, and it's in changing even how we identify. So through social media, I'm finding out from Africans in America that I'm not African American because they don't consider me African.
That's right.
They're like, we're African American, you're a Black American.
Yeah.
Because I have no direct roots coming here, living in Africa. I have been uprooted, my African roots, years ago from slavery. They said
Generations ago.
generations ago. So they look at me as, how are you African American? You were a slave. And they consider, they'll identify with me being a Black American because they were never slaves. And I'm learning so much years later. And I'm like, well, hey, how do I identify? Because I don't have the language. I don't have the direct traditions. So much of that culture was stripped because I was brought over here as a slave. And I'm learning this from Africans who are truly African Americans. And I said, well, I'm a person really without a rooted country if this ain't no. And then I'm not Black. I am an American of color.
Right.
And when I was sitting with my meditation and going through all this yesterday, because with this, I'm identifying with, who am I? Who am I? And I said, well, can I write on an American of color?
Yeah.
Because to me, it's derogatory to be called Black because I'm not Black. And there's so many things that come with that.
You know what? We create our identity.
Right. So that's why I am a American of color.
Very good. That works.
That works for me.
Okay.
I don't know how many people are going to be in my tribe.
There will be some.
Yeah, there will be some. But I can really respect now the difference between being an African American and how that came about. And yeah.
Mhm. Actually, if you look at the long history of human branches, slavery has been very, very, very common
Mhm.
in world history.
Yeah. In different countries, all over
In
the
different
world.
countries. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the Irish who left Ireland, the poor Irish families, their culture was stripped too
Mhm.
by the English. And what they were living was a form of slavery. And as somebody who identified as Irish, I've been very aware that there's very little that came down to us that was Irish culture, because people who came here didn't have it. They came in a very stripped down state.
Mhm.
I've heard it said that in the Middle East, at the time of Jesus, during the Roman occupation, 90% of everybody were slaves. It's like, okay. So we don't have the word slavery necessarily in our recent vocabulary, but it's something that just about every human group has passed through somewhere, somehow,
Mhm,
across history.
mhm.
It's part of the human condition. Ah, pregnancy tourism. Yeah, where you go someplace where you want your kid to be a citizen of, so that your child is born there.
Oh,
Okay,
anchor
thank-
babies. We
thank
call
you.
it anchor babies.
Yeah,
It's called anchor babies in the US. Yeah.
yeah, and the US has been one of the places where pregnancy tourism has occurred, yes. And
Mhm.
it's, there's a lot of countries where it doesn't matter where you were born, that doesn't give you citizenship. But in the US, up till now, at least, that being born here makes you a citizen of the US. And that
My
can change.
sister has dropped African American. She said, I'm sorry, I'm an American. And I should be treated as such. And
Yeah.
she said, I no longer, she said, when it has the other, she said, I'm not identifying as an African American. She said, I know nothing about Africa. This, she had determined this before. She
Yeah.
said, I'm an American,
Right, good for her.
period.
I agree.
Yeah.
Great.
And like I said, we create our identity
The identity.
by
Yeah.
making a decision
Mhm.
that, okay, this is what I am. So for many years, I thought of myself as Irish, but then I didn't like being Irish. So I picked the other half of my background and said, oh, I'm English.
Well,
And
sometimes when they ask what race are you, and they put all these different, and then when they added now the new one, for the Asians, I forget what, Pacific,
yeah, I love it.
whatever. I said, enough of this. So when they had other, I put human. Sure. I want the human
Very
race.
good. I have come to the point,
I do.
I've come to the point where I put other too.
Yeah. And when if they want other to be filled in, human.
That's good. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, exactly.
In there is a poet called Rumi in West. They call him Rumi. He's from Afghanistan. Indeed, he says that we have these things as identity, but what it happens is the occupations which we have, like I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a president, whatever I am, or whatever ethnicity I belong to, sometimes that contributes to our arrogance, and if we want to be a person who could be a better in the world, we have to actually get rid of the titles we have in order to be that, that I, which I say that I am that I always,
Yes.
create problems that, we cannot tolerate other people. So it's good to know where you belong to and to learn from it, to enrich yourself. It's really important, but not to take it so seriously that, it blurs your vision, that you don't see
Right.
others, it's like
Right.
one thing I wanted to add to that.
Yes, I agree. That's very important. If you know about or can easily find a poem by Rumi that says that and can share it with us, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank
He
you.
actually, he was a very great scholar, religious
Oh,
scholar.
I know. I know.
When he
We
came to
are, we here are well aware of Rumi's poetry. It's
Yes.
beautiful and it's wise and it is amazing.
So when actually he came to his master, his master told him, I cannot teach you. He said, why? He said, you are a leader in your society. You are a very great scholar. People call you with different names. I cannot handle you. You cannot be my student. And he said, like, go bring me wine. And he was like, how could I bring you wine? I'm a Muslim scholar with a big name in my society. You want me to bring wine in public? In a glass for everyone to see it. And he said, if you cannot do this, you're not my student, go away from here. So he had to go and bring wine to everyone to see that this guy, this great scholar, Islamic scholar, is taking wine like in and you know, going on the road. And he was like, he said that to strip you out of all these identities you have, because if you are not empty, if you have all these identities inside of you, you cannot enter the light of God in you. So you have to, you know, get away from these titles which you have. So this is
Yes.
something I want to say. Yeah.
Right. We would really enjoy if, I mean, Rumi wrote so many poems. So if you know one or two that say this, I'd be delighted to share them. And it's absolutely true. And that's kind of where I'm coming to by a different route, by asking people to go way back in the history of these ethnic and racial identities and realize that they are appearances from recent history and that everybody shares humanity and that everybody contains the genes of humanity. And that's a really important awareness, because the better we are aware of that, the more we understand how we are one, which is
In
really,
this point, it's like I apologize, I speak a lot, and I there's one more thing I came to my mind. It came to my mind. I wanted to say that in Greek philosophy of Stoicism, there is a point that it says that when you wake up in the morning, you look up in the sky and you zoom out and see what is above you, your roof, what's above your roof, the sky, what is above the sky, limitless galaxies, which even Earth is a single teeny part of it. If you zoom back to the history, you cannot remember your grandfather. So look at how back we can go. And that could give you a great lesson, you know, to not be filled up with yourself. And as much you zoom out, you will be humbled, you know, that I will not be remembered if I die. So let's make it, you know, something
Yeah.
which leaves a legacy.
yes. Anytime you want to bring one of those texts to a class, especially when we're considering identity, please do.
Absolutely, sure.
Thank you. Okay, let's look at another page. And I think I may have, yeah, I did. Okay, I'm just going to have to read it. My photograph went away.
Page is that?
Okay, you've got the book, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's look at page 37 at the bottom, the paragraph in the bottom, and going on to 38.
Is that where it says, when you have a true fundamental grasp?
Starting from the year 2000.
Starting.
The page in my book is not marked. It's the page we read from was 36. So this is the next page. It says chapter 2. And then I'm looking at the
Yes.
bottom of the page, starting from
Oh,
the year
starting with the year
2000.
2000. I have it.
Okay.
Chapter 2.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Starting with the year 2000, the internet transitioned from academia and military to everyone's desktop and later onto our mobile device. This sparked a process that opened countless new channels for information, going beyond the revolution, and took place when Gutenberg invented the printing press. Today, everyone can instantly publish news to the entire world. As a result, we are forced to filter the deluge of information directed to us, because WikiLeaks now define what you know or believe, as opposed to the Wall Street Journal or the Times. With the explosion of the internet into our daily lives, who we are is heavily influenced by the whole load of parties and channels that provide continuous input. Politicians, media, religious leaders, academic elites, even security professionals. It can be anyone and everyone that creates a news website, blog, or other media channel.
Okay, let's stop there. Okay, so that's quite the opposite, isn't it? Of being identified by who our ancestors were and what their occupation was and what they did for a living and where they lived their whole lives, if they did. Instead, we now, plus, in addition to the background, the roots, we also have all these things that are going on that we are right there with because of the internet, because of our screens. Personally, I think that this kind of screen experience to me has been very stabilizing because it means that, you know, I've been able to spend time with and discuss with and reflect with people who are interested in some of the same things that I am. So I have, it has been helpful to me, especially with the pandemic and the isolation, the physical isolation that has provoked. It has been very helpful to find a tribe of choice of people that I feel I have something in common with. And that's what we do in our adulthood in modern times, is we often leave the farm, the place where we grew up, the tribal background that we had, and travel. And we aren't, sometimes still we're driven by political disasters and the impossibility of surviving where our background is. And Zabula, you can attest to that first person of not living where you grew up because of external events. So my guess is that you're in the process now of identifying who you are again. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
I think
How-
that's right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Zabula because I know he's right in the middle of this personally. So what are the things that you're asking yourself?
Indeed, I actually lately read philosophy, and I get, you know, into big questions sometimes that we actually, when you know that like when that thing in Afghanistan, the situation in Afghanistan happened, especially, let me talk about that because let's like that really affected every individual who is from Afghanistan. Believe me, what happened, my family is still there, half of my family is there. And when that happened, I went to the Ministry of External Affairs. And when I went to the ministry, they used to behave very politely to foreigners, especially from people who have from Afghanistan. They used to treat us as friends because it's like bureaucracy and politics. Because like that time, the situation was good in Afghanistan. When the Taliban took over, when I went to the external embassy, I was in the reception. Nobody came to talk to me. I called in different numbers. They really, believe me, I really cried, honestly, because not only because my family was there, because my whole Afghanistan is there, it's gonna be fine. But when you are being treated differently, and like in the outside the guard, the security guard, because India is a country which is mostly people are nationalists, really, and sometimes nationalism makes people very sick, you know, and like that person, and I understand. I really do not blame anybody, even the terrorists, for being a terrorist because they come from somewhere. So
Right.
He asked me, like, this is all the reason of the religion you are following. This is all the reason of the country you are belong to. And when you are in that kind of situation and someone puts other blames on you, and when I went there, nobody actually treated me well. And like nobody came to talk to me. Like I had applied for the visa. There was no information that what's gonna happen to them. So I was really treated badly, and it really hurt, you know.
Yeah,
And it
definitely.
was really, and sometimes you cannot choose where you are born, and that could become a source of suffering sometimes to you, you know.
Yes, absolutely. It
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
So, yep. And it's true, anytime that we migrate, anytime we go someplace else, whether it's regionally in the US anyway, and I'm sure that's true other places, or internationally. I know when I went to France to live many years ago, for a year, I felt very, very, very isolated because I couldn't really find any friends. I couldn't find anyone with whom I could crack a joke, for instance, who would laugh at the same things that I would, or that understood what I was seeing or experiencing, because I was looking through my lens as an American, and they were looking through their lenses as French people, or as expatriates from other countries. You know, so I had friends from other countries, but they weren't really friends. We were friends because we all felt like foreigners, which doesn't go very deep. But the second year that I was there, I moved to another place, and I decided, okay, I need to find friends. So who am I in France? What do I like? What do I like doing? And I went and I joined a chorus and a hiking group. And those are the people that I hung out with, and they became good friends. I'm still in touch with them. But I had to decide, okay, now that I've experienced this culture a little bit, I have to stand up and decide, be somebody that they can relate to. I'm tired of being all by myself. And, that worked pretty well. I was pleased. But it's hard. You can't be wishy-washy. You can't be indecisive. You got to just say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. And this is how you're going to see me. And, it worked. And I've learned since, of course, that's what we all need to do, whatever the circumstances are that we're in order to create a life that lets us be who we want to be. And we're all doing that, and we do it repeatedly. And whatever new circumstance we find ourselves in, like, okay, I was a teacher. Retirement age came. I retired. Who was I going to be then? I had to decide. My first grandchild was born. Okay, I'm a grandmother. Who am I going to be as a grandmother? I had only one grandmother that I knew when I was a kid, and she was great. And my mother was a terrible grandmother to my daughter. My ex-husband's mother was a really great grandmother. So I had two models of great grandmothers and one model of, So I decided I was going to be a great grandmother. I don't think I've lived up to that, but I've been a better one than I would have been if I decided I didn't care. We never are as perfect as we hope to become.
Sometimes
Um,
the realization is important, you know, in order to
Yes.
become good. You see other people, the good and bad examples, and you learn from it, and you
That's
know,
right.
you can realize that I need to do better. So that's the realization can make you better. So that's
Exactly. And we learn from each other. We learn from other people. You know, we have examples in different roles. And when we need to become a holder of a role, we decide based on people we knew,
You know,
Yeah.
that's,
how we're going to
that's
be.
interesting. Because I had to decide what I was gonna be once my disability really like got me down. And I remember when I met you, Rosemary, you know, coming here, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm by myself and I'm in this wheelchair. What am I gonna do? And you said, don't define yourself. You're not that chair. And don't define yourself by being in that chair. Limit yourself. And I always kept that in my head. And I had to figure out who am I going to be? You know, I'm single, I'm by myself in a wheelchair. I look doomed. But then I said I could be independent. I can deal with so many other things that I can identify. You know, and even in the community that I live in, I know just about everybody in the building because they see me. I'm in my chair, going to the grocery store and taking care of my business and talking to people. And when Emma was here and walking the dog, and no longer identify by my chair. My chair was no longer a negative thing. I was
Label.
like a label, right? I'm like, these are my mechanical legs. I'm like, I move throughout the world different than other people, but the same because I'm moving and I'm out and I'm doing the same things everybody else is doing, getting there by car or whatever. I'm like, I'm in the perfect community and I don't see it as I'm out of my chair. I'm a 65-year-old woman who lives alone, who's very independent and can take care of herself and supply her needs.
Yep.
But I didn't see that. You know.
Yeah, that's a big learning. And it's something that hopefully we learn along the way because it keeps happening. You
Well,
know,
my
that's,
sister's learning from me. She's 12 years older than me, had to have a knee replacement in this, and she was very active. And now she called me, she said, Blanche, you've been, and we were very disconnected. She said, I'm learning how to age through you. Being confident and
Right.
and seeing the positive, and because she's dealing with a lot of things in her life she didn't. And now, and you know, the time when she really didn't talk to me, because if I expressed where I was in life, it's like, oh my goodness, you know. But
this is really beautiful, you know.
Yes.
I could really relate to that. I haven't actually, because I'm new to the sessions here, I haven't actually talked a lot about myself, but I also have a disability. And for me, it was much more difficult because coming from a very difficult, different background, then being a refugee, at the same time being a student, and then having no actually financial resources and other resources in life. Believe me, if you see things as weakness, it ruins your everyday life and your whole life. When I used to go to university, on my way to university, I used to, because India is a very crowded country, I used to get pushed. And after I used to get pushed, I used to fall in the ground. And getting up from the ground is very difficult for me, very difficult. It takes time. So I used to see disability as something, you know, which is the other person's fault. It's, you know, universe's fault, it's God's fault, or whoever's fault. So what happened used to, when I was young, when I used to fall, like it was a year of 2-year transformation. Before 2 years, when I used to fall, I used to blame that person. I used to tell him, please look, you know, when you are walking, be careful of your surroundings. Don't push people. And that that person also used to say something back. And when I used to go to the class, even my class used to, because even the class, the university environment is very crowded. The left in India, people are not very much, you know, taking care of people who are in need and everything. So people used to just run and take the left. And when I used to go, because my disability is not something which is visible, and so I used to struggle a lot. And when I came to see this, that I became very vulnerable, and when I accepted myself. So when I used to fall, I used to tell people that it's okay, it's not your fault. I have a disability because of which I fall. And it's my normal routine. I fall 10, 15 times a day, and it's normal for me. And like, that's the reason when I used to fall, I used to beautifully, you know, have a conversation with that person. And I go to the class, have a good conversation with other people. My disability became a, you know, a source of joy to me. And that's really a good experience that I also can
And
share.
actually, it's true with many people, not all, but many, that if they know what you are really experiencing, they become compassionate and helpful. People want to help others.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit that when we're hiding important things about ourselves, that we're bringing more suffering on ourselves. But it takes experience to
Well, when we're
realize that.
hiding, we're afraid to ask for help. You're afraid of that rejection because the hiding comes with afraid to ask for help. Because that was me also.
Right?
I was hiding my weakness because I do have weaknesses. And there was a time with that last surgery, I'm like, I can't hide it. You don't see me strong all the time, smiling, this and that. No, I cry. I have tears. I hurt. I have bad days. And I don't hide them. And people became so compassionate that Karen here. You know, I don't know if the people know Karen. It doesn't live far from me. And from time to time she'll call Blanche, I'm out. Is there anything you need? And I'm like, always cookies. Because cookies make me smile and bring me joy. You know, I have food, I could cook, I could do this, but cookies bring me joy. You know? So when you're not
Zabiola, I don't know
hiding,
if you have encountered cookies. Have you? Zabiola? Cookies?
Yes, I have
cookies.
in Afghanistan, we have cookies of our own type, you know, different types of
You know about cookies then. Okay, good.
I do.
They're just so good when you're feeling bad. A good cookie. It could be anything. It could be a 50-cent, $1 store brand. I don't know. Cookies just.
Yep, cookies.
Some people it's chocolate, ice cream, whatever. But mine's
Right.
cookies.
And you know, the truth of the matter is that as human beings, all of us have things that we're not good at, that we're disabled in, and that we don't share with other people. And people think of us as weak or stupid or what's wrong with them? You know, when we don't admit. And people don't really want to know what our disabilities are. So, but everybody is struggling with something.
That's right.
More than one
And,
thing, usually.
And in Greek, Stoic philosophy, there is a thinker called Marcus Aurelius, and he actually says that whatever in life disaster comes and hit you, that disaster, if does not affect your morality, if it does not make you a bad person, it doesn't affect you. Like if your leg breaks, that's an experience which you only have. Nobody else have that. So you have to be happy for that thing that has happened to you, you know? So that's why you have to have a perception that when you wake up in the morning, because in the Greek times, there were public bathrooms, you know, people used to take in a public bath. And he used to say, when you go to the bath, you will encounter people who will be mean to you, who will pour their dirty water on you. So when you wake up in the morning, you have to perceive this way in order to go and meet the world, to be able to, have a good life. Otherwise, you'll fight everybody. You'll come back, fight to your wife and husband and family. So you have to have a good
Mhm.
sense of perception of the world.
That's true.
That's what my
Yep.
doctor tells me every time I come in, because he deals with people with chronic pain all the time. That's his specialty, the pain doctor. And he said, Ms. Floyd, I love when you come because your disposition and everything. He said, because when people have to live like this constantly, they can be kind of mean. He said, and even though I'm helping them, I'm here as someone to help them. And I said, well, I think it feels bad enough just hurting all the time. And I feel like if I am being mean and having a mean disposition about it, I don't know, to me, it seems like it'll make it worse. That's just in my head.
Mhm.
Because the joy for others is also the joy for me. And if I'm suffering and it spills off on people because I'm doing that, then it takes away my joy
Yes,
of life.
right.
If I'm angry at the world because everyone else has this beautiful life, not beautiful, beautiful life, and I don't, I'm taking away from my own joy.
Yep. Whatever we think about multiplies.
And that identifies, again, who I am.
That's right. It does.
That identifies who I am, because it's who I am as a mother, who I am as a grandmother, who I am as a sister. And then it's who I am as a disabled person.
Who you are
And with each one, how you want to identify
as a person.
as a person, because they're all as a person.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Karen, you're not saying a whole lot. Are you thinking?
I've been listening to some beautiful stories here, and it touched my heart, and I was thinking, yeah, we all do have challenges that we deal with. Some are not apparent.
That's right.
And I know for me, it's very hard at times for me to self-disclose, what's going on, because I really feel like, well, they're not going to like me to do that, or, let's just keep it on the, on the positive part. But, it really is important to share, because it is part of my identity. And,
Yep.
but
Right.
in listening to those two stories, it was just beautiful. I mean, I love the attitudes. I love the positive energy that came out of those stories. So taught me something.
Yep.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Zabula, it's really nice to see you
Yes.
and to meet you this way. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mike.
Okay. So I think this has been a good discussion about
Yes.
identity. There's so much in there of our identity. It's an amazingly rich subject. And it makes such a difference both to us and to everybody else, how we decide to be who we are.
Who we are.
It's really not something that's decided for us.
Exactly.
We get to decide.
As what we actually identify ourselves with, that decides how we'll behave in the world. Because if we decide with different labels, then sometimes that labels, are gonna, how do I say it, cloud our thinking,
Yes. Yep. And labels actually aren't useful.
Well, actually,
There-
labels are something that'll put on us.
Well,
Just
we
like
can,
this.
we
It's
can
like
ex-
this is a container, but somebody put this label on it.
yeah, right.
Labels are something that's put on.
But
My
we don't
identity,
have,
I think, is something I decide.
it is something we
My
decide
decision.
because if we don't want a certain label, we don't
You can take it off,
identify
right?
with it.
Yeah.
We
but I
don't
said,
act like it.
Mhm. The labels that are on me, I didn't put them on you. And sometimes that's other people's perception of what they think. But who I am is who I decide and what I create. And that's why I hate labels. Because labels are the things that, how the thing where you're walking down when you're younger and somebody slap a thing on your back and you're walking around and you don't even know it's there. Yeah, I feel all my labels are those things back there that other people perceive. I don't even know about.
Well, sometimes you get to know about them.
Well, yeah. But
Eventually
I
you
didn't know
do.
they were there. Yeah, when they kick you, especially when you get the kick me label, yeah, that's when you know it's there.
But whenever we react to a label rather than to who a person
Yeah.
is,
Mhm.
we are making war. We're not making peace.
Right,
exactly.
right. But then I think too, like with Karen, when we're open to share who we are, that's another way of forming peace and another way not to label someone.
Right.
Because I think a lot of labels come from people's assumption.
Absolutely. Yes.
But
And
when
this-
assuming is not peaceful.
no,
Exactly.
no, it's not. No, it's not.
Coming from Afghanistan, indeed, I have a very good experience of, what not being exposed to other traditions could lead to. Like in Afghanistan, I was born and raised in countryside. Then I came to this center, to the capital of Afghanistan. In general, in Afghanistan, you study like religion and in a very, how do we say, one interpretation of religion, which is a little extreme, honestly. And when I was raised there, I lived in a place which was controlled by the Taliban. And you could really understand when you travel the world, or you could go to another country, you can realize how that people, that boys who live there, who become 25 years of age or 30 years of age, when they join the Taliban or when they join any other group, believe me, I do not blame them, because you do not have an alternative view of the world. You go, number one thing, that there is no priority of education. You are raised, and some of them, for the financial gain, they join the Taliban or other groups. And the thing is that there is no alternative. There is no exposure to other religions, that you should know that I'm not the center of the universe. There are other religions, there are other ethnicities, there are other people who have beautiful truths to themselves. And so that makes you arrogant, that this is my way and people have to follow it. And if that happens, then a whole generation of extremists are being, actually, this is something which I proudly say that I have. Change is beautiful. If we do not change, then we are not a rational human beings.
Not
Creation of
alive. If we
Yes,
don't
I used
change,
to
we're
be an
not alive.
extremist. I used to think different things which are not, and I've like, which are really, I feel now that I used to be an extremist. And now when I see the world is very beautiful. When you have a narrow mind, then you make your life difficult.
Yes.
He put
You know-
tears in my eyes with that.
Yeah. As I look at our four faces, so different and so beautiful and
Indeed.
so loving.
And
Wow.
so much the same. They're
Yeah.
the same.
Right.
You know, I look at it, what she took this picture and blended all our faces together. That would be,
I don't know how to do that
I know that, but I
technologically.
would love to know that technology to bring all our faces together.
How about you, Zabulik? Could you do that?
His
I think-
sound is off.
Yeah. I
You're
got
muted.
a screenshot of all four our faces, all four faces.
Can you do that?
If that's what you mean, yeah, I got a screenshot in which four of us are in a frame.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Show us the next time. That'll be fun.
yes.
Sure.
Oh, this has been awesome. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
you
and I'm
guys.
so glad to be back.
Huh?
I said, I'm
Lisa,
so glad to be back.
yeah, we're very glad to have you back.
Yeah.
Lisa is not going to be here for a couple of weeks. She needs surgery. And
Oh,
for some reason, they've delayed it, and she's in great pain.
oh,
So
no.
please pray for her
Yes.
that she gets the surgery quickly and it's successful.
I was wondering where she was today.
Yeah, because she's really a good participant in these
Yeah.
discussions too.
Mhm.
So pray for
Yes,
her
she
and
is.
think of her as whole and healed
And
and
healed.
pain-free and back to being herself.
Great.
Okay, so I'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
I'll be you.
And we're moving through chapter 2.